Hello everybody, Daniel here, more Pokemon of the week, and when I found out what my Pokemon was going to be for this week, I was quite happy, because this is a Pokemon that has a lot of interesting features going for it. It's Stoutland, number 508 in the National Pokedex, and it's obviously one of the new 5th gen Pokemon. It is currently in the RU tier, albeit it has been in pretty much every single tier going. So by the time this comes out it might have changed, but for sake of argument, let's say it's in the RU tier, because it is at the point of this recording. As a pure normal type, it only has one weakness, and that is to fighting. It has an immunity to Ghost, but unfortunately normal types, as you'll probably be well aware, don't have a single resistance, so that's not particularly wonderful. Its abilities, though, are pretty wonderful. It has 3 abilities, all of which are very, very handy. Intimidate lowers the opponent's attack 1 stage. This is pretty handy if you're a bulky Pokemon like Stoutland is. Sandrush doubles your speed in Sandstorm, which is also very handy considering base AT is very, very average for a speed stat. The 3rd ability, Scrappy, means normal and fighting type moves can hit ghost types. This is incredibly handy for Pokemon that are normal types that only go for 1 attack, because it means that you physically can't not hit anything. You know, with normal type attacks being completely non-effective on ghost types normally. Its base stats are very useful, very well rounded for it. Its special attack is awful, but it doesn't use it at any point, and if you're using special attack you're normally very desperate on a Stoutland. It is quite a shame because it does have quite a useful special move pool, but never mind, we won't dwell on that, we'll dwell on what is useful instead. Its attack of 100 is very handy and very useful indeed. And it's pretty bulky too, considering base 85 in health combined with base 90s in both defences. That's pretty good actually. It's just above average, but for the RU tier that's very impressive. So if we go to the first of the 3 sets, this is the set that people will use if they try to run Stoutland in overuse, which isn't as stupid as it initially sounds. See, with Sandrush and Sandstorm, and weather in general, being incredibly common in the OU tier, running Stoutland is not the most stupid thing going. The reason being that base 100 attack combined with a choice band is very, very, very powerful if you can predict well enough to pick the right move. There's no variation in what moves you could pick for this set, unfortunately, because Stoutland's move pool just is not helpful enough to run anything else. Return is your stab move of choice because it hits over base 100 plus stab. And with 100% accuracy, that is definitely going to be the way to go. Superpower is perfect to run alongside because it will hit all the steel and rock types that Return can't hit, of which there are quite a lot of steel types in OU, albeit a lot of them do have a psychic subtype, so you're not going to be quite as effective as you'd hope. Crunch in the 3rd slot is very useful as well. If you can try and catch, for example, a Gengar by surprise, Crunch is the way to go. The 4th move is Wild Charge. We're sort of scraping the barrel for moves that Stoutland can use, frankly. And the reason to use this is because you're going to hit Gyarados incredibly hard, even after it possibly intimidates you. And really, it's not too bad for type coverage. Electric is pretty handy in a tier full of flying type threats, which didn't used to be the case, it has to be said. Obviously put all your EVs into attack and speed and throw the random 4 anywhere you want, because it really doesn't matter. And run Adamant, because by the time your Sandrush goes into effect, you're going to be outspeeding now on everything anyway. The only exception would have been Excadrill, but you don't have to worry about that. That's in Ubers, so don't you worry. Obviously don't run this if you're not doing a Sandstorm team, because it will not work in OU. This is literally the only set in OU that has any chance of survival. Don't try and run Scrappy to make your prediction easier. Don't try and run Intimidate to make it more versatile. Stick with what it does best. The second set is, if you're going to use it lower down in the tiers, you don't really have to run a choice band, but pretending you are running a choice band is a very useful thing to do, simply because people will treat you with a lot more caution. And that will allow you to get more switch-ins. Having Sandrush Yeah, you might as well, just in case there is some incredible opportunity that comes down. You can run Scrappy as well, if and when it becomes available. But really, you don't massively need to, because with an expert belt, you're going to do more damage with things that are super effective. Obviously, normal can't be super effective, but if you run a life orb, you're going to give away that you have a life orb with recoil damage. So you can't do that, because people will not treat you as if you have a choice band if you're losing health through recoil. It's, kind of obvious. Also, running life orb with wild charge is very risky, because you're going to be losing health to recoil like Billy-O, and are probably going to kill yourself before you kill anybody else. To get onto the moves, return is obvious. Wild charge in the lower tiers is very handy, because there are a lot more generic, reasonably rubbish water types about, and there are absolutely tons of them. Superpower is always a good move for Stoutland, regardless of what tier you're going in. It's a base 120 power move that can't miss, so I would make most advantage of that. And then your fourth move, there's a bit of variety here compared to the first set. The reason being is simple. If you are running a choice band, you do not want to get locked into an elemental fang, because the moves in isolation are pretty poor at best. They're base 65, they're not stabbed in this case, so you're really not going to do a whole lot with it. Even if it is choice banded, it's not particularly ideal to be locked into a very situational move. I mean, Fire Fang, if you were in OU, would only hit things like Fortress, Sizzle and Genesect. Now, Hard and Ice Fang would hit the Dragon Flyings that loom the tier. You can run them in a lower tier simply because it's not, you're not going to get stuck into it, which is the key factor. If you were to if you want to role play this further, to say you are bluffing a choice item, the first couple of times you use your Stoutland, use a move once and then switch out. It's going to make it a lot more understandable from the opponent's perspective for them to believe you have a choice item. Because if you blow your cover immediately by, say, using return on something, predicting a switch and then using superpower, doing that ruins the entire point of bluffing, and you might as well have run a choice band in the first place, because the element of surprise has gone. Obviously the EVs are going to be identical to the first set, because you're pretending to be the first set. You can run Jolly if you want here. That's not the worst thing in the world to do, because that way you could switch your ability to one of the other two if you're feeling like you want to do that. I would recommend going for Adamant, because that's the way I'm used to seeing it, if I'm being completely honest. The third set is a set that I've made up, tried it briefly, and it worked to some degree. It's actually got quite a lot going for it, this. With a careful nature boosting your special defense, and with full investment in special defense, you can take special attacks very, very well with your base 90 special defense by default, combined with an 85 HP. Normal type is not the worst type in the world for a defensive Pokemon. Sure, you don't have any resistances, but you only have one type weakness and you have an immunity. So you know for a fact that most of the time you're not going to get hit super effectively. And because most fighting type moves are physical, that is why I put the focus especially into the special side. If you want to balance the books in terms of defences, you can run a bit Intimidate, which will lower the attack of a Pokemon that you switch into. Unfortunately, the idea of being a wall is that people will usually switch into you, so that's not hugely useful, but that's the safer method you could go for. The reason I put Scrappy there as well is because this set only runs one attack, and it's going to be Stab, so if you want to hit any ghost whatsoever, you're going to have to run Scrappy. Rest and Sleep Talk are a combination that go together very well, albeit in this generation sleep is a bit more of a pain because the sleep counter resets if you switch out, but it doesn't mean it's completely useless. You whack things as hard as you can with return, or roar them out if they're a problem for you, and then you go to sleep. And you'll use Sleep Talk to continue doing this while you're trying to wake up. Remember, rest always lasts for you have 2 turns of sleep and then you wake up on the third. Or unless you switch out, in which case it resets back to that point. The this is quite a useful set actually. This worked a lot better than I thought it would, because again, people suspect that you will be choice banned. So if you run with return first, people will assume you're choice banned and switch immediately. And this obviously gives you a turn to do whatever you want, whether that's to protect the Stoutland by roaring or by returning again to hit something else. This does require quite a bit of synergy though, because in isolation this Pokemon's not going to do anything. You have to sort of think this one through a bit. And obviously in order to do so, you need to team it with something that can really help your cause. An example would be to try Quillfish, Nidoqueen or Scolipede, as I mentioned, because all of these not only will help you, if you're in Quillfish's case, by intimidating as well, but more importantly, all three of these can learn Toxic Spikes, and this is a type of set where you're going to be wearing your opponents down. And if you're going to roar them out, you're going to keep switching Pokemon out constantly. So you want to get a set of entry hazards up as much, to a larger degree as possible. And Toxic Spikes are going to be your best ally for that. You will require, though, a Pokemon to take out a Pokemon that could absorb Toxic Spikes, of which there are a few lurking around RU and NU. So make sure you pack I would say a good fire type with you. I say good loosely because obviously in RU and NU there aren't that many of them going. But you'll want to pack something like that to make sure that your plan for phasing doesn't get completely ruined. This is also a very good set if you're trying to stop a Pokemon that's sweeping you by, say, Swords dancing up on you. So it is quite versatile if nothing else. And I think that's that. That's 3 sets done. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next week, oh boy, I can tell you in advance, I'm not going to tell you which Pokemon it is, but I'm not looking forward to it. You might more than me. I really hope you do. Peace out, everybody. If you enjoyed the video you've just seen, please join my Facebook group and follow me on Twitter for the latest news.